We're here at the Jewish Link Pitch Meeting Podcast. I'm here with two very, very special guests. Okay, one, my friend David Birk, and also here my new friend, Paul Hilbert, who I've known you guys for a few years, and they are the founders of Network Doctor. Okay, so you guys have a really nice story, and I feel to welcome to the Jewish Link. Welcome to our new look studio. Tell me a little bit how you guys met. We'll get to Network Doctor. I just want to hear about the Birk Hilbert story.
So usually when we start telling the story, we look at each other because we take turns who goes first.
I
guess we have this like innate, sense of being able to read each other's minds because we've been working together so long. So, the background is me and Paul actually met in Frisch. We both went to Frisch. We graduated in 96. And Paul was the first friend that I actually made. I grew up in Riverdale. I went to SAR, and there weren't that many kids who went to Frisch at the time. I think there were maybe two others, and our grade was about 120 kids. So I immediately was in like fine friend mode, and he happened to be in the locker. He had the locker right next to mine, and we started talking, and he told me he came here with 10 kids from Schechter up in New City. And I was like, all right, I got to be friends with him because that automatically would open up my friendship circle. But it turned out to be the start of a really long relationship and a meaningful one.
You got to be friends with him because he was a refugee from Westchester. He was a refugee.
Okay. Well, New City.
New City. Oh, Schechter closed on you. You were there, or?
We weren't there, but yeah, it closed, I don't know.
Shortly after.
I remember it. Later. I remember that. Yeah. Okay. So keep going.
Yeah. We were friends through high school, and then I ultimately went to Israel for the year. I went to Bar Ilan. Paul, he's always been in a rush. He went on to go to.
I left high school early, so I went to college a year early, and then I went to Binghamton. Then Dave joined me in Binghamton.
You went early admissions to Binghamton.
I went to RCC early.
Sure.
I spent a year there. When all my friends were seniors in Frisch, I was in school from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. and they were there till 5.
Paul's always been a serial entrepreneur even since we were kids. So like me and our friend group, we used to, wait for him to get a job in the summers. And then he'd say, hey, I'm working at a medical billing place. I'm working at Ramah. They need, people. And we kind of like jump on.
We controlled a medical billing place at 16. At 16, I got a job at a medical billing place. I think we were up to 10, 12 friends that came to work with us there. And this is before work at home or anything. So it was basically me and my friends in this medical billing office.
Right, so that was great,
and it was a different time. Like you're just like writing up these doctor bills and transcribing.
No idea what we were doing. Right, we were like just kids entering these numbers, and I remember one time there was one of our friends accidentally entered the wrong number, and like
accidentally
somebody got a bill for $1 million for an EKG, and like I remember it sort of set off a storm in the office. But it was fun, and we laid that foundation of friendship. And like Paul said, I ultimately went to Binghamton. And we became, we stayed friends at Binghamton, and Paul was already in the marketing, what was it called? School management track, which I joined after I got there. And, sort of like a pivotal moment was, I was looking for an assignment for one of our classes that Paul was in with me. And I said to him, I go, do you have the syllabus? And he said, this is 1996 or 7. And he said, the teacher emailed it to us. And I said, how do I get the email? And he's like, well, you got to log in. I'm like, I'm never going to log into that, right? I can talk to people. What do I need to email people? And he actually said to me, and I still remember to this day, he said, email is going to be a really big deal one day. You should start using it. And I remember like kind of brushing it off. And obviously the irony that we run an IT company all these years later is there.
Paul the futurist. Awesome. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and then ultimately after college, actually, Paul's dad saw something in me. He said that, Dave Burke's a sales guy. I used to go over to their house. I used to call his mom Paul's sister, and be like, you must be Paul's sister.
Can I just say that actually when I met you a few years ago, I said, you must be a really great salesman. I just say, we'll hear that over this conversation, but I feel you have the perfect sales the sales personality. Yeah. You love that.
Look, I don't love the term sales, right? Because maybe sometimes it has a connotation, but I like to connect with people genuinely.
Absolutely.
And that's really the goal. I like to win, and I like to connect to people. And I think that ultimately is a good formula for being a successful salesperson. So his father, saw something in me too, and he hired me to do sales for his company. Paul was working there. It was a telecom company. And literally, I kind of didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I was having conversations with people and opening doors. And that's sort of how our working career started. You could talk about Teleplan and how it spun out. Network Doctor spun out.
By Paul, so you went straight to work after graduation
Right.
for your dad.
Like everything else, I graduated college a year before David because I started a year earlier. I was only 20 years old and like went into the working market.
And this is like what? This is like the beginning of...
It was 99.
Okay.
So it was like right in the dot-com boom.
So this is Web 1.0.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Just the internet just came out, and you know, I think what got me into computers was in college. You know, Gateway and Dell had just come out, so like my thing was breaking them and then putting them back together. I probably spent more hours on phone with tech support for Dell than being in class when I was in college, but it kind of just taught me appreciation for the hardware, how it worked, and whatever. It got me into what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something with technology. So coming out of college, we got, like David was saying, a job with my father. We were doing consulting for a telecom company, but it was really, my father had spent his whole career working in telecom. And, you know, it was at a time where he was really executive in there, and he was bringing in consultants to do that. Happened to be the two of us were as junior as can be, but we went straight into the boardroom. It was, you know, we were in there. It was a publicly traded company, and we're presenting to, you know, the CEO, the CTO, the head of engineering for this company. And we were running, at the time, they were building out data centers. It was just a new thing. They were building out data centers across the country.
Still a big topic today.
It's a huge topic today. For financial company, you know, financial networks. So we got our start there, and that company actually flopped. You know, I think they sold to Global Crossings, and Global Crossings went bankrupt or something around the that. And then, you know, from there I went on to start Network Doctor, and David separated and went to go, you know, further his telecom career with AT&T.
Oh, you guys split up? I didn't realize.
We split up.
I didn't realize. I thought you guys
a couple of years.
Yeah.
Oh.
But the truth of the matter is that we ended up continuing the relationship. So David was working for AT&T and selling internet T1s. I don't think anyone today even knows what that is.
Yeah.
He was selling T1s, and when he would sell to a small business, they needed an IT company to come in and install it. So he would refer the business to me. We still even have a few of those clients today.
Wow.
That, you know, we were introduced to back in, you know, early 2000s.
So we stayed connected from a business standpoint.
Living near each other also? You guys like...
He was in Riverdale and I was in Englewood.
Okay, got it.
And
Well, you guys did not do the Upper West Side? You never left?
Oh, so
never,
I actually
the
did.
nest?
So I lived in the Upper West Side for 10 months.
Okay.
That like first 10 months of working for that and then I moved to Englewood.
Got it.
I think he followed that path more than I did.
Yeah.
I tell people I lived on the Upper West Side, but after college I lived in Inwood, which is like the upper West Side.
I know where that is.
Go.
That is, yes.
But then I got married. I moved to Riverdale, which is where I'm from. And I sort of like got thrust into a management role at AT&T, which is as big of a company as you could possibly imagine, right? And it felt a little soulless, but like Paul said, you know, when I would sell to an accounting firm somewhere in the city, and it was early on IT, it was early on technology, they wouldn't know how to like connect it. They know like, oh, we need it, but now how do we make that, you know, work on our computers, right? And just to give you an idea, because he said T1, a T1 was like 1.5 megs, and today like files could be a gig, right, or 2 gigs. So you do the math.
And if I recall correctly, if you were a big business, you had to get a T1. Like
T1,
that was like I remember like being a thing for like 7 or 10 years.
It also was like $2,000 a month for you know,
real money.
T1 at that speed.
Yeah. Right, because the alternative was like the AOL dial-up, right? And if you picked up the phone, you didn't realize your dad was in the basement online or whatever. But anyway, so there was that huge gap, right? And I would contact Paul and I would say, you know, I just sold this to a client, give him a call. And Network Doctor, you know, or at the time, Paul was more focused on homes. It was like sort of a part-time thing. And that kind of, you know, started the, you know, the entree into businesses. And then there was a point, and, you know, at that point in my life, I hadn't had kids yet, right? I guess it was like 2005. And I said to my wife, Lori, I said, you know, I can continue with AT&T and go on, run a sales group somewhere else, which felt strange too, because I was, you know, 24, 25. And everybody on the team was, in their 30s or whatever. And I said, or I could take a chance, take a step backwards, get into this and see what we could do with it. And obviously that's ultimately what I decided. And, like everything else, it was like we believed in ourselves. It was, easier.
Wait, so Paul approached you. Paul said, "Hey, David, come work with me full time." Is that what happened?
Yeah, it was, you'd sent us the business that sort of helped us, stand on our own, right? Instead of, having other jobs as well. Let's see if we could, make a go at this.
And it was called Network Doctor at the time?
Yeah, it was Network Doctor.
We were right across the street, by the way. 141 Ayers.
Oh, wow. I didn't okay. I know that. We know that house very well. Sure. Yeah. Still tech companies.
And I remember I came to visit, and obviously working for AT&T on 57th Street in a really nice building. And then I'm going into there. I'm like, do I really want to do this? But I kept telling myself, I'm like, if I'm going to take a chance, and I kind of had a vision of what I wanted, for my life and the kind of work I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to make a meaningful difference. Because really, like I was saying at AT&T, it's so large that, you're working what you do, and what happened before it came to you and what happens afterwards, you're kind of like completely blind to.
Yeah.
Right. And I was always like curious, like, going back to the T1, like, what exactly is a T1? Like, how does that work? Yeah. Right. And none of the other salespeople really care. They're like, who cares? You get a commission for selling. So I was like, all right, let's do this. And we did it. And, we, it was probably financially a step backwards for a couple of years. And then ultimately, really having control over, the vision of the company and being able to really create and hire good talent, and things like that. And I saw that happening. And, we've been doing this together for over 20 years now, which is like amazing.
What is it? Are we at 21, 20? Where are you guys at? Your anniversary?
So I started Network Doctor back in 2003. So we're going on 20. Yeah.
And but your vision was the same, like your vision. I mean, your vision was was his division, but you just needed to have good guys like David to grow it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is when we got into the business, like David mentioned, when we started doing homes, we had gotten into the industry right when Wi-Fi came out. So it was, you went from having one computer at home that you basically plugged into your cable modem, and then you would have multiple computers, or you have a laptop that you want to walk around the house with and share a printer, so on and so forth. So we actually took out an ad in a local paper and started servicing homes in Englewood and Teaneck, and it took off right away. I mean, everyone needed it. It was a need. I mean, actually, what drove it was there was an ad in the New York Times about Best Buy and starting the Geek Squad. And I had a theory that just wasn't going to work it wasn't the same thing as like flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. Like you just couldn't have a standardized service like that where
many Best Buy couldn't work with the homeowner.
Yeah, they needed more hand holding and more white glove. Especially it was a new thing. Nobody, it's hard to imagine today, but computers were not a household thing.
It's funny because I actually moved into the area, moved into North Jersey around that time, early 2000s, 2002, and I actually remember that ad, and I think I remember thinking that you guys were like local guys looking to help people with. I guess it's funny you said that with Wi-Fi, with home networks, like that was. But you didn't stay with home networks, and
right.
I have a feeling that David's vision wasn't just walking, selling. His vision. He was still remembering the T1s. So but you guys changed.
What happened was some of our clients, being that we live in an affluent community, or we're working in an affluent community, were business owners. So they said, if you do this in my house, can you do this for me in my office? And we started to work in the offices, and we realized that there's a lot more standardization in the office, and it was just a lot easier. Plus, immediately we were getting calls at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. My daughter can't print her homework, or can you run over right away? And, again, mostly about homework or printer jams and things like that, which, again, we were in our low 20s. That was fine back then, but it did get old quickly. So, having businesses that for the most part ran 9 to 5 was just, felt more like a professional job. And we quickly transitioned. The other thing is that MSPs in general were really just on the brink of starting. So, before that, I know what the acronym is. So the computer industry, obviously computers started, in the late 80s, early 90s.
Mainstream.
Mainstream personal computers started in the late 80s, early 90s. And for the most part, they really weren't connected or networked. People were using them as word processors and, just printing. And there wasn't much in way of tech support. A little bit later, in the later 90s, they came out with this thing called VARs, which were value-added resellers. So you could buy a computer from someone with a little bit of support. So maybe they helped you get it set up and started and buy some accessories and so forth. But it wasn't really until the early 2000s that was the advent of the MSP. The MSP stands for Managed Service Provider. The idea is to go into a business and bundle all IT services into a fixed monthly price that became the outsourced IT department. So when we got started with that, it was a very, very difficult transition, which I think is right around when David came on and when we started together, because when we started, we were billing clients by the hour, and there wasn't much else that was included in our product. It was really just labor.
Yeah.
So
what I will add to that is sort of like it was a big shift in our industry, right? So first of all, going back to what an MSP is, it's a very nondescript name, managed service provider, right? You can flap that onto a lot of different things, right? But what it meant for our industry was that transition from being like an IT guy, like when I have an issue and I call up my IT guy, he comes, he fixes it, and then he sends me a bill for whatever amount of time I was there by times the rate. It was that was very difficult business to scale, because you didn't know if you were going to get 10 calls that week, or you were going to get 20 calls, or you were going to get 100 calls, right? And cash flow was an issue then. And also the other thing is you were very reactive, right? That was kind of the biggest shift. And we were getting to a point where, we're already at the point where people were so reliant on technology that what they weren't thinking about is like, how do I prevent things from happening instead of like addressing them when they do happen, right? So from our perspective, which is where Paul was going, right? If you're in a reactive seat, right, you can only help them when they call you, right? But if you could show the value of like, I can take care of some of these things so they never happen, right? That's where the magic comes from. So from a business perspective, where that shifts is instead of, sending you a bill because you called me for 10 hours that month, right? We would say, hey, we're going to give you a fixed price, and it's going to allow us to do whatever we need, and you could still contact us for support, right? You're always going to have that request, that reactive component to it. But we're also going to be able to do things when you don't call, like, proactive maintenance, putting in alerts on your network, and so on and so forth. So you saw a drop in like the problems, which presented a different problem because the value proposition is more apparent when, the client has an issue, and then you go and you fix it. But there's a way of balancing that, which, maybe we'll touch on. But that was a real shift in the industry. And for us, there was thoughts of like, well, once you open the floodgates and you say to the client, call us whenever you need us, right? Is that going to create this wave of requests? And what we quickly figured out, and we kind of assumed, people don't want to call their IT people if they don't have to, right? They just want their things to work.
Yeah.
So
you remind me of doctors, by the way. No one ever wants to really call their doctor ever, except when your body part's not working.
But the smart people go to their doctors even when they're not sick, right? And that's kind of the idea. I mean, when the company was named Network Doctor, that wasn't exactly thought about, but ultimately you're able to make that connection, right? The healthiest people sort of take care of themselves when they're healthy. So that was similar to our industry, right? So we're kind of making that shift. And like Paul was saying, that was a little bit of a difficult jump, because in the early 2000s, business owners, especially, small business owners, had a hard time perceiving the value, right?
Forget about that. I get that, but even you guys asking a client to start paying you $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month, like when they were just paying you, it must have been a big deal. Like those first few clients must have been. But one thing I was going to ask you was like, what client did you know that, hey, this model worked, or do you knew the business was set? Like, when did that happen? Or
Right. By the way, fast forward a little bit, the relief that we got when we went into the first client that we were actually replacing another IT company, and they were already familiar with that fixed monthly contract. And then, I feel like it was sort of downhill from there. It was a lot easier. But the other thing is today, these agreements have flip-flopped. So there's so much more included in what we do than just the labor that we're providing, whether it's account management or Microsoft licensing or Azure licensing, cybersecurity licensing, backup. All these things now are bundled into the monthly agreement that the labor is really a smaller component. And it's a lot easier to maneuver. Plus, the industry is actually matured and developed.
What you're saying is it's not just the labor. It's you're actually doing more. Meaning you're actually providing with all that. I think it's with all that extra support. You're providing a lot more than the old days.
For sure.
But it's actually it's fun. I'm sitting here. I'm realizing, wow, yes, I remember all this stuff. I was I'm a .com dropout. I don't admit that. I had a company called Fix My Resume. Long story. Not gonna share it here, but I remember all this stuff that you're talking about. And it's actually funny because I knew about Network Doctor, and I actually think I even remember hearing that you started firing your home clients, that you couldn't be called anymore if the printer jammed. And I know that happened somewhere in the mid 2000s in the aughts. So
was there an article about it in the Jewish Link?
No, we only started in 2013, but I remember hearing about you guys growing. Okay, and that's actually cool because you really in a sense. Young guys and almost a whole new industry, by the way. This did not exist. You were a part of that way. It's just cool to me.
I think timing's definitely, there's a little mazel in the timing, but we were actually at the forefront of that. So, going back to your question about that model, the business shift, right? Was it hard to get clients to agree to it? Yeah. Yes and no, right? It's sort of like you can show them like, hey, 1 month you spent $1,000, the next month you spent $10,000, right? The math was easy early on, which was like, hey, let's just take an average of what you spent, wrap it in, and hopefully we could drive down the number of hours that you call us because we're more, preventative. And, we started to, hit a roll with that, and people were like, okay, that makes sense to me, right? Yeah. If you can show the value of like what a pain and how much aggravation an outage cause, people can understand that, right? So, the best time to sometimes reach them was after there was an issue, and you could say you could prevent it, but then, well, why didn't you prevent it before? And that's a longer conversation. But people started to understand the value of just staying up, right? And the other intrinsic value is like, employees want to work for companies that have good technology, right? They don't want to be slowed down by
Agreed.
Whatever the problem they have is. And that's hard to put a dollar amount on, but that's probably the most valuable thing, right? It's so hard to find good talent that one of the things that I think attracts people to businesses is that they have good technology and that you show that you're invested in that area.
That makes perfect sense. So, you have any good stories from the early days? Any funny stories? Anything like anything that just stands out in your memory? Like maybe that first big client, your first 6-figure client. I don't know, anything that stands out.
I'm very nostalgic. Paul is too. It's a little bit more subtle than me. There's so many great stories working together. For 20 years, like so many great things happen. You asked about the first client. I remember the first client. And I remember acting cool when they signed it, and I saw it like being signed. And like I said before, I love to win. So the signature for like people in sales is like, you got the signature. And I remember we kind of waited, we held it together, and then we got in the elevator and we were like high-fiving each other. Like, we did, I can't believe we actually sold it. And then,
A good moment, by the way, I'm sure. Yeah.
We have about 130 employees now, and we've worked with like hundreds, probably thousands of people, right? So that comes with like some great stories too. Look, the key to every good business relationship is to develop like a connection with people, right? Yep. Beyond the business itself, right? And some people you could do that with, other people like aren't interested. But when people sort of let down their guards and you're able to really connect with them, it fortifies the business. And then you start to hear like some crazy stories. People will be like, I have a computer at home, my son's on it. Like my son goes to these weird sites or whatever it is, like opening up, and it's like too much information sometimes. But let me digest and think of some great stories, like the things that really make us laugh. I mean, one of the things that me and Paul enjoy doing the most is, building culture in a business. And this is related to your question, is like really critical, right? But especially young people today. And, most of the people that work for us are in their 20s, maybe 30s. They want more than just the right salary, right? They want a friend group, and they want a place to socialize,
opportunities, all that. Yeah, a lot of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I always say to people like, when we're interviewing them, there's 2 interviews going on, right? Obviously, I'm interviewing the person for a position, but their interview back is much more important in the grand scheme of things, right? Because they're going to be spending 8-9 hours a day right? And you do the math, right? Most of their adult awake lives, you're at work. I think you really should like what you do, like the people you work with. And, I think that's really important. I make sure that like they're sold on it as much as we're sold on them. And to that point, typically our industry is very transient, right? Like you get somebody to stick around for 2-3 years. I don't know what the stats are, but we actually have very high statistics in terms of how long people stay with us. And that's obviously good for the business because, knowing the client is important. People like to hear the same voices. But that has allowed us, getting back to sort of the stories and the memory, has allowed us to be with some people a really long time. I mean, like 15, some people 20 years. 10 years is a lot in the industry. And like when we, like I said, culture is important. So doing happy hours and like events and being able to like reminisce with people and share stories. Some stuff's probably not appropriate for the Jewish Link podcast in terms of just some of the crazy things you see when you're like, you're working under the hood of the business. Is some of the things that we really enjoy the most, and probably some of the things that we're most proud of, is to be able to build that. And some stories will probably come to me, but
I think some of the fun moments were, it's hard even to relate to this today because really, COVID I think sent the whole small business world into a whirlwind. But it used to be pre-COVID that Dave and I spent most of our time in New York City going between clients. So we didn't spend that much time in the office together, and really, the ride home was like our chance to unwind or catch up. We'd be in meetings all day, so catch up on emails or phone calls that we had to make to our different clients. So I think the thing that we used to do to each other is, on the rides home was we, start a call up with a client, the other one's joking around on the other side, and the amount of times that we'd have to hit mute or have awkward pauses in the conversations, or oh wait, we got disconnected. Sorry, we'll call you right back. Right. It was just nice to sit back and have fun while working. I know definitely when we start going back over those stories, sometimes we weren't even able to catch our breath in the car.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what I was saying about how important it is to like the people you work with, I feel like one of my greatest blessings is working with Paul, having a friend at work, right? Because having a partner can be one of the most challenging parts of running a business, or it could be one of the greatest blessings, right? And I'm not going to speak for him, but like, we've seen what good, bad, and ugly look like in our industry just in general. And we kind of, every once in a while we have that inflection point where we're like, wow, it's good that you have somebody you can rely on. We live in the same town. We live down the block from each other, and a lot of people 20 years later, like, you don't want to see that person out of work, right? And we've been fortunate enough to, not go there. I think our personalities work in that sense. And, that definitely helps. And I think that also trickles down to the organization, right? If they see conflict up top,
it's not a good recipe for sure.
Yeah. And you're giving people sometimes an excuse to like, be confused or what's the message I'm getting.
So I think the fact that we grew up together gave us the comfort in each other that, we don't only have a professional relationship. So, we know how to, we know all the dumb things that we did when we were teenagers together.
I love that. But I by the way, that's a big piece. That's a big piece of it. The fact that you guys are really, those relationships really are hard to break. Actually, that gets into my next thing, by the way, which is really, I actually like the fact that you started off in the Jewish community. You're back here in my studio. So what's the message that Network Doctor has for my readership, for the Jewish community, Jewish Link community? What's, and really actually, Dave, this is really an outgrowth of some of our discussions back on the Pesach program, not just this year, but even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So, I know that kind of being in the Jewish Link is a little bit of an experiment for you guys, but I kind of want to hear, I did a little selling, but I want to hear, what you're thinking.
Yeah.
So
I think when you mentioned, what you saw in me in sales, I kind of felt the same way about you.
Spice, right? I want you to know something. Stop with the negativity. Salespeople are worth their weight in gold.
No, I get that.
We love them.
I get that.
I'm headed, but
if you're a good salesperson, people don't know you're selling, right? Like, it's really, you're really able to speak to them, right? And make sure that you're selling them something that they need. So, our story is kind of funny too, right? I think like 2 Pesach programs, maybe 2 winter breaks, certainly 1 winter break.
Yes, that's right.
We happen to be, on the same flights there. a table over at the Pesach program, and we sat right behind each other during davening, and you slowly like chipped away, like you should really advertise, in the Jewish language.
Didn't do the heavy sell, I promise.
No, but it worked. It worked, and it was a great experience too. Like, it sort of made us.
I try not to work on my Pesach. Yeah.
It sort of allowed. Like, I like doing different things once in a while. I know what I'm good at, and I know things that I haven't embarked on. So, like, becoming an ad man for a minute, probably not my most successful role, but it was fun to do, and we had help of staff, but that allowed us to connect, right? So that sort of speaks to that connection. We certainly, we start in the Jewish world because that's where we live, right? And, anybody that runs a business, like, you try not to talk shop on Shabbos, but people know who you do,
yep.
what you do. And if there's a need there, they know if you're good or bad. And people refer you, right? So that's a unique thing about our world. But we weren't targeting necessarily Jewish businesses, right? We're targeting businesses, right? What's most important is that the client profile matches, right? That there's an appreciation for technology. We don't compete on price. We know we're not the least cost provider, right? But we try to create the most value, right? So, just going on a really short tangent, right? There's three things we're selling on. We're selling on like reliability. We're selling on people using tools to do their job better, but also like the strategic aspect, right? Like, what am I not doing that can really propel my business forward, right? So, we're looking for clients that kind of really value that in their business, knowing like, hey, there's more I could do. I know I can make my people better, faster, smarter, right? That's the profile we're looking for. And if it happens to be a Jewish business or a not Jewish business, that's kind of irrelevant. Even though we're not targeting the Jewish market, it's obviously important to us, right? We want to see,
absolutely,
certainly the not-for-profits and Jewish industries grow, right? Obviously, we have our challenges today, serious challenges today, and we need to, certainly support each other and everybody, but really bring light to the business world too. I don't think it just stops in, our personal lives. So it is important for us to be able to advise, even if we're not involved and there's no gain for us. We're always happy to take like a phone call and sort of say, hey, you should look at this, and we could say, we can help you direct, or you should speak to these people. We definitely want to be, we're at a point, I think we always have, but certainly, the company's a very mature point where we want to be, leaders in the community in that sense too, aside from the other things that we do. And, advise. It doesn't necessarily have to come with a financial reward, but, help organizations, just be the best version of themselves.
I like what you just said. I also like the fact that you're talking about doing business consulting, in many ways. That's not just the tech, cyber, that side. And I think you guys already are community leaders in a certain sense. So hopefully you only continue. And you guys are young. I think you're younger than me. So I consider you young.
But that said, given the world that we live in, we do have a number of businesses that are Jewish owned, and one of the verticals that we sort of backed into, I guess, would be not for profit, right?
Yeah, I know you have a number of nice Jewish nonprofit businesses, sure.
So it wasn't a vertical that we were targeting, like, hey, let's go after the not for profits. But we saw that there was a need there, right? We kind of recognized when we got invited into them, right? And we've worked with a number. Again, the Vida Dome and some of the schools in the area.
Jewish Home.
Jewish Home for many, many years, right? They kind of saw the value. Not-for-profit sometimes have a hard time understanding the value of IT because they're so focused on the mission. But I think over time, certainly like in the cybersecurity landscape world that we live in, they also kind of see the threat, right? And unfortunately, sometimes it takes a little bit of pain before they understand, hey, we need to get ahead of this and invest.
Like a ransomware attack, a data breach, a full, whatever. You guys could tell me all the nightmare scenarios.
Exactly. So. And that's exactly sort of how that vertical opened up to us, right? Like a law firm, accounting firm, they kind of recognize, like, I need my people to be working, billing hours. Other industries, it's not so obvious. But like, just sticking with not-for-profit, they kind of recognize, like, if they get breached, right, there's a lot of sensitive data information, personal information. If you're a big donor, right, the last thing you want to see is that organization that you're giving to is, not doing the right things to make sure they're safe. We worked with a huge food bank in Pennsylvania, and we actually have another food bank here in New Jersey, community food bank in New Jersey, that recognizes the importance too. But we were working with a different one, and they got breached. I think it was a ransomware, and they were taking for $1 million, right?
Wow.
And it was only then that they were like, holy cow, we need to get ahead of this, because they had some huge donors, and they're like, we're not going to give you another penny until, you shore this up. And I think the other things that moved the industries forward, certain industries forward, was, cybersecurity insurance, right? All of a sudden they were like, hey, we're not going to give you a policy that's $500 a month, right? They were figuring out the industry too, because it's going to cost us a lot of money to remediate. You need to prove to us that, you're proactive in securing your information without getting into all like the technical details, before we're going to give you a policy. So there were other things that were pushing our industry forward in the last, 7 or 8 years that have really helped the MSP industry in totality, right? But I think the smart MSPs kind of leaned into that and showed the ones that haven't felt the pain, you need to get ahead of this.
It's just a boon for you guys. Like, I'm saying, it's just that's every company, any company big, needs this. I'm just saying, almost anyone with a few employees, or even anyone.
The nice thing with our industry is there's been major shifts, over time. So it's not like you end up in the same remedial job over and over and over again. So, for example, we started out, like we said, the MSP world was just starting, like, creating the whole support thing, and then it was all these products that got added on. And then the first major shift was cloud, right? Email shifted to the cloud,
right.
And it was our competitors were all in panic mode because the BlackBerries were going away, the email servers were going away, the backups for the email servers were going away, and there was a lot of revenue that was wrapped around that. And we saw an opportunity because we're like, wait, we're charging the same thing, but we're not doing any of that stuff. So we, again, embraced that. We moved all our clients as fast as we could into
the
cloud email. And then sure enough, right after we're done with cloud email, it was like all these cyber attacks started happening. So now we start talking about cybersecurity and getting the right software in place to do cybersecurity and so on and so forth. And I think now, right, like in this post-COVID world, and with the advent of AI, I've seen and heard that really businesses are starting up overnight. So it's like everybody and anybody wants to just run their own business and not commute into an office, and you have the ability to start something, whether you're developing your own product or application to do something with AI, or you're automating something in some other industry. And we see an opportunity there because, for the most part, a small business that's starting out today, they're going to go register their LLC, they're going to go register a domain name, and go sign up for email with Microsoft or with Google. Mm-hmm. No one's thinking about the fact that Microsoft and Google don't back up your emails. There's no cybersecurity wrapped around that. You're basically open. You're the weak link. And we see an opportunity there because, when you're small, 2, 3, 4 people, you're not imagining getting a contract with a company like Network Doctor. You think that we're too large, and you're not ready to spend thousands of dollars a month on IT support. But at the same time, you still need the right products in place. So we put together, starting with this, but we're going to continue with it, a promo. We're going to list it on networkdoctor.com/JL for Jewish Link. And what we're doing is putting together the basic Microsoft licensing, backup for your email, cybersecurity licensing so that you have some security, plus templates that we've built over the last 20 years to just secure your environment. And at least that your email's running and you're not going to get hacked tomorrow. You have the basics, I's dotted, T's crossed. And you can, you'll get an insurance policy, like Dave says, you'll qualify.
Yeah, but actually, quick question: we've actually written about it on the Jewish Link. What do you think about these cybersecurity insurance policies? Do you sell them? No. What do you guys?
We don't sell them. For a point, we were we weren't requiring it, but we were pushing our clients to get them, and we were also inventorying our clients' insurance, just what they had. Number one is because on an annual basis, clients were having us fill out the forms for them, which was taking us hours. We had to figure out a way to get compensated for that.
Right.
To get underwritten.
I'm saying, you mean companies are, okay. I was saying when companies are getting audited, you're responsible for their tech audit. Okay. Good.
But not only that, clients may have had an expectation that they had a certain level of protection that they just didn't have. So for us, it opened doors as well. Cyber insurance, for example, like they require multi-factor authentication. So, that's got, not all of our clients had that. So once insurance companies started requiring that, it became a lot easier for us to go in and say, listen, if you want to have insurance, you got to do this. And it wasn't only a cost. It was, multi-factor until you got used to it was a pain.
Yeah.
But, like everything else, you get it second nature.
But you make money also because you're installing that MF, that multi-factor, and you're monitoring okay, got it. All right. Okay, that's interesting.
So you asked, do people need it? They absolutely need it. I mean, it's the biggest liability if you think about it. If your data goes away, right, it's a disaster, right? And there's all these stats about it could put you out of business. And I hate, fear selling. I think that
we've talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to say he was so concerned that we wouldn't put these ads in the paper. Just fear mongering, worst case scenario like that. It was like the truth is between you and me. Fear works though. So fear is powerful. So I'm off two minds.
I think in this case you're right. That's right. Anytime you enact insurance is because something bad happened, and you should probably be afraid of whatever brought you to that. Mm-hmm. But it happens, and it's I'm not so comfortable selling like in that way, but I also understand that I have a responsibility to do that, right? So there's a way to weave it where you can balance like the fear and understanding the severity of the or the need for the protection with people feel like they're getting advised properly, right? But that it's the Wild West out there, and it stinks, and it keeps us up at night, right? So we have about 400 clients that we need to support, and you want them to take your advice because it's like like a doctor, I know what's good for you, take these vitamins, do these security, take these security measures, but you need to nudge it a little bit. But like the last thing you want is to get that phone call and find out like everything's locked up and we need help, because we will never use that as an opportunity to be like, we told you so, right? That's not the right time.
Yeah.
So, to your point, yeah, I think it works and it's, somewhat needed, but you also want to do it in a safe way.
I probably spent 5 years or so doing that. And I didn't see myself as selling in fear. It was more, creating the fear to provide the right solution. I wanted to make sure that our clients were protected, because at the end of the day, it's our responsibility. Like, clients are looking at us for the technology. When they got hacked, they would come back to us and say, we'll have this happen. And just to, kind of share a story around that, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, Dave and I had actually closed a really big deal the night before. We were up celebrating and so forth. And 7 o'clock in the morning, I get a call from one of our biggest clients that they got hacked. And, immediately in my head, I realized the gravity of that. They were, 3,000, 4,000 users.
Wow.
I knew that this wasn't like a 2-3 day project. We're talking about months to recover, to get the systems back up and running, to be able to, to replicate back to where it was. I mean, the amount of data that they had just to be able to restore that. And we went into like immediate emergency mode, brought in like
and it's important to note, right? Like that would have been an example of telling a client, we told you so. We had worked on that client for a very long time. You need it. Right?
Oh, they were hacked because
right. They didn't sign up for the right.
Oh, good. I was actually going to ask that. Good. Yeah. So okay.
Yeah.
So they weren't looking to blame us. That was a positive.
We walked into that and they're like, we know. Let's just fix it. But you still have to address it.
Right. And by the way, that also was a multi-million-dollar. They paid multi-million-dollars in cyber in crypto that they had to pay through. I learned a lot through that process.
Okay. So you've been through these ransomware.
There's brokers that will sell you your crypto so that you can transfer it, and there has to be.
By the way, it's incredible. There are pictures of like call centers in wherever, Asia, Eastern Europe, where they're like operators, and they're picking up and say, hey, you got hacked, and what they'll do is they'll say, we'll unencrypt one of your files to prove to you that we can do it, for free, and the rest you have to pay for. And it's like really wild that exists, like the sophistication of this criminal activity.
But not only that, they took it to the next level, because we would always think, all right, if we have a good backup, yeah, you might be out of business for a couple days, weeks, whatever, but we'll bring it back up and running. We don't need the hackers. But the hackers have your data, and they're using embarrassment in the press to make it even worse. So they're like, all right, you don't have to pay us, but then we're going to release your files out, and there'll be stories that you got hacked and so forth. So, they were forced to, even though we had restored everything and done everything, and brought them back up and running, they still paid the hackers because they want, and there's a trust there, right?
Trust the guys who stole your data.
I'm stealing $1 million from you, but I'm not, I'm going to hold my word that I'm not going to release any of your data.
I can't, by the way, I can't imagine. I mean, I can't imagine paying.
There's consulting companies that specialize just in that negotiation to deal with.
Just saying these Russian hackers or these Iranian hackers did a little bit more trustworthy than the.
No, there are those consultants. A lot of the times, the insurance companies have them. Will say, "Oh, we know that organization. They will unencrypt your data." But I don't necessarily want to focus on like the ones that got hacked, because those are like, today they're very. There's nothing entirely preventable, right? You could work for the biggest banks, and there's always, I have a very good friend that works at a very big bank, and he's an analyst. And, I remember being on an airplane with him, and he was working on the spreadsheet, the modeling spreadsheet. And I was like, how are you able to work? He's like, there's millions of dollars worth of man hours in this. And I'm like, how are you able to like put that on a USB stick? And he's like, oh, it's the only way I could work on it, because when I'm in the office, I have to do the encryption. But then when I'm on an IP address, all these different things, I can't do it. So simply I plug in a USB stick, I save it to that, and now I can work it on which is like the least secure. But my point is that it's very hard to completely fortify your environment, because you also need to balance that with like people's ability to just work, right? Do their jobs, right? But when I say it's very preventable, there's so many like reasonable things you can do that don't impede on people's ability to do their jobs, that make sense. And it's a conversation, right? Sometimes it's compliance. And if you're in industry and you're in, healthcare, or you're in finance, where it's like the SEC is telling you need to do this. So this is not coming from us. We have clients that sell to Walmart, and Walmart has their own compliance. It says, hey, if you want to sell to us, you need to have X, Y, and Z. So that kind of moves the needle. But, once those things started in the press, there was something about a hospital in the UK that got hacked a long time ago, right? Once those things sort of became headlines, people were like, all right, I know I need this. And our jobs became easier, right? So, our industry has evolved, and you said it's blown up. And yeah, I think it has. And I think but you have to be smart about how you evolve with it, right? It can make or break you. And, what's ironic sometimes about technology people is a lot of them don't like change, which is, counterintuitive. But you really do need to change. You sort of need to embrace that change. Like Paul said, move to the cloud, go with it. Don't say like, I need to stay with servers because I'm supporting something, right? Lean into it, be on the kind of the edge. But, these evolutions have been fun in our industry, right? Going from hourly to fixed fee to, the security to now AI, right? It's like a great, interesting journey. It keeps things interesting. And, I always tell people you can take it with a grain of salt, but I know we're good at what we do. I know we put a lot of effort into being thoughtful about, the technology and having the right training, but really the biggest value proposition, or certainly a value perception, is the client experience, right? What happens when you email us or you call us? Does the client feel like, hey, they really understand what I'm asking? I don't feel like I'm repeating myself. I'm talking to maybe the same 2 or 3 people. And that comes with a company of 130, that comes with a lot of thoughtfulness, and that doesn't always necessarily shine through. But, there's a lot of effort that goes into that.
I'm amazed at how much you guys have grown. I didn't realize you had 130 employees, and it's just amazing. And by the way, just quickly tell me, like AI, like what does it mean for a company like Network Doctor? Like, because I don't know if you mentioned something about people starting businesses. I have no idea what AI means for an MSP like you guys. So talk. Just give me the quick, the short version, so to speak.
So from our standpoint, AI is still at grassroots phases. So,
Correct.
a lot of people are scared in all different industries, right? Like you hear a lot of kids now want to go into be electricians and plumbers because those aren't going to go away with AI.
That is correct.
So for us, I don't have a fear that tomorrow IT support is going to be done by AI. It's just not ready. If you call into an AI call center, you can immediately tell. And I don't know, I just get frustrated and try to get representative, 000. But I think that what we're trying to do with AI in our own business is automate as much as we can. So whether it's analysis of clients or tickets or computer, like let the AI do the work in the back end and give us reports so us humans can communicate and make decisions based on that.
Yeah.
And that's where we're looking to start with our own clients. It's going in there and seeing what are the repetitive tasks that you're doing that the computer can do for you.
By the way, that's a totally different business, Paul.
Yeah.
That's a whole another business. But that's actually what I'm seeing what these AI consultants are doing. And you're coming already as their trusted,
You're right. You're 100% right? Like people sort of think like, oh, technology, it's related. I think it brings together the business consultants and analysts and understanding process there's a tech side to it certainly too. And, like when these things happen, and it happened in the .com era and the cloud era, right? Like everybody like rushes in and every commercial now has AI in it. And it's like, what does it mean? I'm not even sure they know what it means, right?
Right.
But it's there and, it pops and then sort of the dust settles and then you sort of have more clarity on like the direction of where AI is going to take us. And, we're looking at it a little bit different. Like before we start telling other people, like, this is what you need to do, how do we use it so that we can meaningfully say
we're using
it, we're showing you how we're more efficient instead of like, hey, you should do this, that, and the other thing, and I'm not using AI myself. And we believe that that's a strategy in figuring out like how to advise people and creating a huge value proposition there. And, to your point, I think the people in our organization that we would introduce into that foray into AI consulting aren't the most technical people in the company. They're probably more the business-minded people, which is really interesting, right? Like even people in our finance department, the account management team. I think today people use it like, help me write an email.
Right.
Help me write an article, right? God forbid here, but, in other spaces. And you could kind of tell sometimes when it's AI. And I think that one of the other things that will come out of this, it's like, like the people that still listen to music on records.
Yes.
Right? Like they can, digital.
The fidelity of it. They can hear it. They can hear it. They say they can hear a difference, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
They say. I don't know. I don't have that type
those
of ear.
cracks you hear when it goes over the scratch.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which can be recorded, by the way.
Yeah, right.
That can be put in. And AI can put in the scratch.
By the way, some of the AI like answering services, you could decide if you want it like typing in the background, right? Or voices and things like that. It's really crazy. But I think that people will they'll appreciate the human touch because there's just something you can't replace with AI. And if you force too much and like every email's AI generated, you could tell.
Yeah.
And I think it's sort of like I make it a point to make sure that people see that there's like a human stamp on communications.
He uses AI to write his emails. I use AI to read my emails, so that just computers are talking to each other.
No,
it's funny because I'm sitting here talking to you guys, and you guys are in a sense. You're different personalities, but you mesh well, just, I'm just saying, I've known you guys are different personalities, but I'm actually seeing it as we're talking. And it seems like you guys have a really good partnership. And it's nice to experience. So, that's for sure. We're kind of getting to the end, let me, any final thoughts, any final, again, you're talking to many ways. Our readers, listeners are really friends of your friends. We're probably no more than 2, 3, 4 degrees away from you guys. So,
if that much, right? Probably 1 degree. Coming into this, right, you don't reflect on like the history of the business and the relationship that we have and other people in the organization. But it's like a great opportunity to kind of like reflect, think back. You asked about like the funny stories. There's a million of them. I wish you had asked us before we got here. And I know we wanted this to be, sort of more off the cuff, genuine. But, they're there and, balancing each other is like a big part of that. There's clients that like prefer, to deal with Paul and clients that prefer to deal with me. And, like when you think about it, because we started.
Hold on, by the way, you're at a point where you don't even. There are clients that are not dealing with you.
They're not
deal at all, which is really that's the only way to scale, guys. Which you know.
We have a great account management group, which was definitely a phase. Like if we really were to dissect the business and talk about phases, that was a big evolution for our business to put in those relationship managers in a very meaningful way. But yeah, like that scaling the business, like how do you recreate that? And we still touch base with clients on a regular basis, just quick like touch points, and put our fingerprints on things that we do. But like coming into this and like talking about Frisch, right? Because sometimes we'll tell our story if we're meeting with a prospect, but like when you go really way back, I mean, I was 13. Another thing I loved about Paul is his parents were never home, so we were always able to go to his house and hang out and have a good time. Those are some great stories for a different podcast.
No, not this podcast, but definitely makes sense. Yeah.
But like
you want to talk about what it was like going to your house?
Totally different experience. But anyway, that's for like the psychology podcast. But when you kind of like look back and you think about like two guys from Frisch, my wife went to Frisch, all of our kids go to Frisch. We live in Englewood, and you kind of think like, hey, that sort of happened. I think like it's a cool story, and it's like, it's hard. Things happen so fast and people switch jobs more than they used to. You very rarely hear about like that person that's been there for 30, 40 years or whatever. Like it's something that we're really proud of. And, I said this before, like having people you work with, our staff, that's really great, and making sure that they feel appreciated, is really important. And like, COVID hit, and that kind of like threw all those things like up in the air, like how do you stay connected? Right. You deal with that challenge too. And like, if you have trust in each other and good balance, like you can navigate those waters.
Paul, any last words or any final?
I think Dave did a great job, but like anything else, you manage a business through metrics, right? So you're always looking at numbers and so on and so forth. But if you get lost in the metrics, you really have to, you have to use some feel and see, there's no perfection out there. You want to strive for the best that you can.
100%. And I just want to say, first of all, you're absolutely right about strive for the best you can. Sitting where my perch, I'd say to you guys, Kane Yearbo, continue the growth. Your reputation is excellent. From my perspective, I don't think I've met an unhappy client of you guys, and we happen to have a lot of advertisers who are also your clients. So keep it up, and thank you.
Thanks for being with us on the Jewish Link Pitch Meeting podcast. If you would like to participate or be in touch with us in any way, please email us at editor@jewishlink.news and follow us and find our podcast wherever you find podcasts.